Your show got canceled, and now some chubby guy with a mustache is going to talk about it for 15 minutes. Have fun, buddy. Enjoy. Now, in this series, Quick Histories, I have already covered two fantastic shows with really interesting histories, Clone High and Mission Hill. But today, we're talking about an especially interesting show. Interesting in the fact that there aren't any real clear reasons why it was canceled. And that show is The Critic. Created by Al Jean and Mike Race, two longtime, or I guess full-time producers of The Simpsons. Also, Al Jean was a writer on one of my childhood favorite shows, Alf, which I realize isn't exactly relevant, but any chance I have to talk about Alf, I'll take it. Alongside these two accomplished creators, the show features some very talented voice acting from Nancy Cartwright, Charles Napier, and playing the titular critic Jay Sherman is Jon Lovitz, a man with a unique sense of humor that is matched by his equally unique way of speaking. Also, Jon Lovitz, no joke, beat the hell out of Andy Dick one time, but that's a story for another day. But I want you to picture this man beating up this man to the point where there's a police report about it. I'm not going to get into it today. It's actually not funny, so don't laugh about it, but picture it, giggle in your head, and let's move on. The show follows Jay Sherman, a chubby and somewhat stuck-up movie critic on the show Coming Attractions. Think Siskel and Ebert back in the day, where they would review movies, debate with each other, that sort of thing, except it's just one guy, and he's a little bit pretentious. Not to mention that the movies that Jay Sherman has to review are usually pretty blown up, terrible Hollywood schlock. And the way it's presented in the show never ceases to be hilarious. I'm honestly surprised that going back and watching this show again, when it's already kind of past my generation, I still laugh at a lot of the parody movies that they've set up. The show received 2 seasons and a web series and currently sits at a nice, comfortable 7.9 out of 10 on IMDb. Now, personally, I love this show. It has a strange, cozy feeling to it with its painting-like backgrounds and relaxing soundtrack. The show's jokes are also on point, and after watching it multiple times over the years, there are still jokes I laugh at. Jon Lovitz is perfect for the part of Jay Sherman, and there are moments where his delivery is so perfect that I'm convinced that no one on the planet could have played this role better. Now, with how much I and so many others love this show, the question must be asked, why was it canceled? And that's really the tricky part of this whole quick history video. I know that's usually what I just go over. That's in the title of the video. But this time around, it's a lot of little things instead of one big incident. When I covered Mission Hill and Clone High, it was really straightforward. This time, there's a lot more digging to be done. But no speculation. I'm sorry, I'm not here to point any fingers at any people I don't know with information that's questionable. It's all pretty dang concrete stuff that you can gather just by watching the show. The sense of humor. A weird thing to bullet point in a video about why a show was canceled. Humor is pretty much subjective. The way you craft it is objective. The way it's enjoyed is subjective. Some people like fart and poop jokes and Adam Sandler. I'm not going to judge you for it, but you can't judge me for not liking it. This show's comedy is pretty straightforward. However, it does have some high class, with big quotation marks around high class, kind of comedy in it. Some jokes that still today go over my head, which I think is fine. You're allowed to make those jokes. You're allowed to go for that. In fact, I think it hammers down some of these characters. If Jay Sherman tells a joke that goes over the audience's head, it shows that he's a little bit pretentious. And the fact that he thinks it's funny and he's like turning to the camera and whatever and saying it, or he's saying it to someone in the show and they don't react to it, that works out just fine for me. But it doesn't for everyone. Some people really didn't like that part of the show and thought it was kind of talking down to its viewers. And on top of that, The Critic came out in a time when New York was a little bit oversaturated. I don't know what it was about the 90s, but New York was all over the place. I just saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990 for the first time with my little brother. New York is all over that place. Did you know that movie's set in New York? That's the 90s for you. The 90s is basically just New York. Think Seinfeld, think Friends, all of these incredibly long-running shows set in that location, so people were a little bit burnt out, but also there are jokes in The Critic specific to people in New York, I guess is the best way to put it. I believe there's a joke during the marathon episode about the mayor of New York, which a lot of people who are watching adult animated cartoons might not get. In fact, I'm almost certain they won't get it unless they are, in fact, in New York. And even then, you probably won't get it. It's a weird joke to make. And I've also heard the complaint, this is something I've heard going back to the show more than when it actually aired. There are some people complaining about the style of jokes being told. There are a good few insensitive gay jokes that probably wouldn't fly today. Some fat jokes that honestly aren't that funny, even with watching the show. They're just kind of there for the sake of being there. When there's an episode dedicated to it, but it has a moral, I'll take it. But if it's just a joke thrown in, I'll just be like, whatever. But to argue that, and this is something I've heard people trying to explain the cancellation of The Critic, that these jokes that were somewhat appropriate at the time, maybe a little bit taboo, but mostly understood and taken in, to say that those jokes are why the show got canceled doesn't make any sense. I think it's much better to say that the show's sense of humor in terms of its high-class kind of pretentious stuff and specific to New York humor is more of what pushed this show in the wrong direction. I do think if these jokes were told today in a show like The Critic, it probably would alienate even more people, but this is 1994, 1995 that we're talking about. Network changes. This is a question for the audience. How many episodes should you have before you do a clip show? And for those of you who don't know, a clip show is an episode of a television series made up mainly of clips from previous episodes. Now we're going to use the TV show Friends as an example. It's fairly popular. I'm on okay terms with it at this point in time. Not going to get into that rant right now, but Friends had a lot of episodes. It also had a staggering amount of clip shows. 6, if I remember correctly. That's a lot for a 10-season TV show. That's one every so seasons. I'm not doing the math right now. I already did math for this bit we're getting into right now. The point is, Friends took 93 episodes to get to its clip show. So 94 episodes before it had its first clip show episode. And even that episode was pretty okay. It was obvious it was a clip show episode, but still it had a story running underneath. How many episodes do you think The Critic had before it got to its first clip show? 22. 22 episodes before it got to its clip show. And the clip show, being the 23rd episode, was the last episode of The Critic on network television ever to be aired. The last new episode, I should say. It came back for reruns, but that's insanity. That is a network not caring about the content of the show, giving up on it, cutting its budget, giving it 3 less episodes than the previous season, only 10, and then ending it on the lowest note you can possibly have. That is horrendous. This shows that the network, while it may have had faith at first and was maybe trying to revive The Critic, did not have full confidence in it. They also changed the art style in the second season, which is why it's such a jarring change from season 1 to season 2. They changed up the theme song. Things I really enjoyed about the first season, they changed and dumbed down to make it more accessible, but it did exactly the opposite. It made it less accessible to the people already watching it. There are multiple people who I've talked to that hate the second season of this show, but love the first one and think that they should have just continued on in that exact style of animation and music and everything. It's ridiculous. This is clearly a network decision. There are some characters that show up in the second season that really are underdeveloped instead of developing the ones you already have, because the network wanted a different angle to play. It wanted more likable faces. We need more Bart Simpsons in here. Are you kidding me? Where's little Stewie Griffin? This can't be a TV show without a little Stewie Griffin. What about Brian the dog? Or the talking bear from the Cleveland show? There's even a bear! These changes that were made to The Critic scream that the network either didn't care or did care but gave up. And that is probably the saddest part of this entire show. It seems like I'm leaning more towards the latter option. There were a lot of people putting a lot of tremendous work into the show, trying to get it to work because it was such a fantastic idea with a fantastic cast, fantastic animation. It just couldn't quite find its footing, and so they tried to change too much, and that didn't work, and at one point the network has to say, enough's enough. I mean, granted, after the second season it got web episodes that were shocking, to say the least. We won't be going over those today because, my God, I don't have the brain capacity to do so. We're just going to focus on the network TV show that got canceled. The point is, it seems like a lot of people cared for this show, and the network canceling it was just an effect of the changes that they made. So while you want to blame the network, you also can't overlook the Siskel and Ebert criticism. Our last point. Siskel and Ebert, two famous movie critics from the 70s to the late 1990s, who appear in this show, who did a review of this show, a pretty positive one, also brought up some criticisms. They're film critics, they're TV critics, all right? And they're rarely TV critics. In fact, I think The Critic was one of, if not the only TV show they covered. It's clear they liked this show, but they had some concerns and they had some criticisms. The main one being that the focus was in the wrong place. What makes The Critic interesting is that it's about the life of a movie critic and all the problems that he has. Finding women, making time for his family, dealing with all these movies, dealing with all these movie stars. That's all really interesting stuff, but the main focus needs to be on the movie critic. And The Critic, sadly, even in its first season, spends a little bit too much time outside of that world, which is okay, but I feel like it could have been a lot better if it was just focused on the life and times of a New York movie critic with his own TV show. That's a really interesting concept, and that's what pulled me into this show in the first place, not just because Jon Lovitz was in it. And speaking of Jon Lovitz, he's perfect for this part, especially in the movie critic role. That's when he's at his best. When he's just Jay Sherman outside of his movie critic pants, he's pretty good, but when he's acting as a movie critic, it is above and beyond fantastic. So the focus was just a little bit off kilter. All of these things meshing together, the sense of humor, these weird network changes, probably being the biggest one, the network changes, because I'm a little bit biased, against the man, as it were, and the Siskel and Ebert criticisms led to the cancellation of this show. And like I said, there are webisodes, but please God, don't watch them. They're not very good. The show was canceled after 2 seasons, as far as I'm concerned. They did everything they could. Now the question must be asked, is this a show worthy of redemption? Worthy of renewal? Worthy of a reboot, remake, whatever? All of the R's. Is it worthy of it? That's the question. Well, yeah! It's a fantastic show. It really is. And despite some of the dated jokes, despite some of the weird changes, there's a lot to enjoy about The Critic. It really is one of the best adult animated shows I've ever seen, and one of the worst cancellations I've ever bared witness to. I just wish it was narrowed down to one aspect, because that would make this easier to talk about and easier to fix. But it really is problems with the core of the show, the core of the network that was airing it, and just the audience's acceptance and understanding of those changes. The show basically shot itself in the foot and couldn't quite recover from it. They tried their best, they really did, but it couldn't be done. It's not a perfect show, but it is a pretty damn good one that I would love to see come back. So I guess that covers The Critic. That's it. It's really just a pretty straight up story of all these small problems. I wish there was more to say, but there really isn't. I honestly wish I could talk about this show for longer, but I really don't have much more to say. I love this show. I hope more people watch it. I hope it comes back at some point. It really does feel like I'm kind of like a doctor in Grey's Anatomy. The surgeon walks in, he pulls down his mask. He's like, we've done everything we could, but we couldn't save the patient. And then it pans over to the patient, and it's Andy Dick after Jon Lovitz beat the crap out of him. In all seriousness, that bit was not funny, and this is the end of the video. If you have any cartoons you want me to check out and do a quick history video on that were cut down in their prime, post them down in the comment section below. I read every comment on this channel, so don't be shy. Yours will not be overlooked. Let me know what you thought of the video. Let me know if there's other things I need to check out, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.